To my eldest son, Mark, the lawyer read, his voice flat, I leave the entirety of the Patterson family farmland, including the North Pasture, the Riverbend plots, and the Oak Ridge section. My brother, Mark, sitting across the polished mahogany table, gave a slow, satisfied nod. He shot a glance at me, not of sympathy, but of pure triumph. And to my younger son, Elias, the lawyer continued, clearing his throat as if the next words were distasteful, I leave the 15-acre plot known as the Barren. A few of my cousins shifted uncomfortably. One aunt let out a soft gasp. The Barren wasn't just land, it was a family punchline. A salt-crusted scar on the earth where nothing had grown for 100 years. My name is Elias Vance. I'm 38 years old, a botanist with a PhD in soil microbiology. And I had just been handed my inheritance. A piece of land considered so worthless it was literally a curse. Mark leaned forward, placing his hands on the table. It's only fair, he said to the room, his voice dripping with false magnanimity. I'm the one building a legacy, developing the land into something productive. Elias, well. He gestured toward me. He's a man of the dirt. This way, he gets his own special plot of dirt to study. A perfect match for his useless research. The laughter was scattered, but it was there. My uncles, my cousins, they saw a developer and a dreamer. A winner and a loser. I didn't say anything. I just looked at our family's lawyer and said, I accept. I walked out of that office without another word, the deed to a wasteland in my briefcase. Mark thought he had handed me a joke, a public humiliation. He had no idea he had just given me the keys to a kingdom. He thought he was shaming me. He was actually making me rich. Mark and I were never close. He was 4 years older, built like our father, with a booming voice and an unshakable confidence that people mistook for competence. He sold his first car for a profit at 16 and got his real estate license the day he turned 21. To our family, he was the prodigal son who never left home, the one who understood money, power, and the practical world. I was the quiet one. The kid who brought home jars of pond water instead of sports trophies. While Mark was learning about property lines and zoning laws, I was learning about mycorrhizal networks and extremophilic bacteria. What are you going to do with that? My father used to ask, looking at my textbooks. You can't eat knowledge. Mark would laugh and say, Don't worry, Dad. I'll make enough money for both of us. I went to college, then grad school, focusing on the unseen world beneath our feet. My specialty became biopotential prospecting, identifying the hidden ecological and commercial value in environments that traditional agriculture and development write off. I studied plants that thrived in volcanic soil, fungi that grew in toxic mine tailings, and microbes that lived in supersaline flats. And that's how I found the secret of the Barren. It wasn't by accident. It was the focus of my doctoral dissertation. For generations, my family believed the Barren was cursed after an old salt well overflowed in the late 1800s. The high salinity killed everything. But my research showed me something else. The unique combination of saline soil, high concentrations of specific trace minerals like lithium and cobalt, and a rare, endemic microbial biome created the one and only environment on the planet where a specific organism could thrive, Oreofungus borealis. It's a species of parasitic fungus that grows on the roots of salt-tolerant scrub brush. It doesn't look like much, but it produces a compound that can't be chemically synthesized. This compound, when refined, is the single most effective ingredient in a new generation of ultra-high-end regenerative skin creams. A single gram of the refined extract was worth more than an ounce of gold. I'd known this for 7 years. I'd published papers on it in obscure academic journals that no real estate developer would ever read. I knew that the Barren wasn't worthless. It was a priceless, irreplaceable natural laboratory. And I knew that Mark, in his greed, would overlook it completely. He saw land in terms of square footage and development potential. He couldn't see the microscopic gold mine under his nose. So when he manipulated the family lawyers to partition the estate, ensuring he got every valuable acre, I let him. I watched him walk right into my trap. His parting shot, a perfect match for his useless research, was the most expensive mistake of his life. The first 6 months were the hardest. I cashed out my 401k, sold my modest condo in the city, and moved into the dilapidated hunting shack on the edge of the property. The family thought I'd lost my mind. "He's living in a shed on a salt flat," I heard my aunt whisper at Thanksgiving. Mark would drive by in his new Escalade on his way to supervise his first big project, Creekwood Estates, a luxury subdivision on the prime riverfront land he'd inherited, and shake his head with a pitying smirk. They saw a man who'd given up. They didn't see the work. I wasn't farming a crop, I was engineering an ecosystem. I used a portion of my savings to buy lab equipment, soil centrifuges, sterile growth tents, DNA sequencers. I spent 18 hours a day on my hands and knees, taking soil samples, mapping the microbial colonies, and carefully cultivating the native scrub brush that served as the fungus's host. This wasn't about planting seeds and waiting for rain. It was a delicate, scientific ballet. Too much water, and the salinity balance would be off. Too little, and the host plants would die. I had to create the perfect level of stress in the ecosystem to encourage the fungus to fruit, to produce the golden spores that held the valuable compound. I endured dust storms, freezing nights, and the crushing loneliness of my mission. My only company was the hum of my equipment and the knowledge that I was right. A year in, I had my first breakthrough. A small 3-square-meter patch of the host brush began showing the telltale signs, a faint, golden shimmer on the root systems visible in my test trenches. I harvested it carefully, my hands shaking. In my makeshift lab, I performed the extraction. The yield was small, less than 20 grams, but it was pure. It was real. While I was quietly achieving the impossible, Mark's world was booming. Creekwood Estates sold out its first phase in a month. He was featured in a local business magazine, posing in a hard hat in front of a half-finished mansion. "It's about vision," he was quoted as saying. "Seeing what land can be, not just what it is." The irony was so thick I could have tasted it. He called me once, his voice condescending. "Hey, little brother. Heard you're still playing in the mud. If you ever need a real job, I could use some help with the landscaping over at Creekwood." "I'm good, Mark," I said, looking at a petri dish filled with a substance worth more than his entire landscaping budget. "But thanks for the offer." Year 2 was about scaling up. I used my initial extract to secure a small research grant from a biotech incubator. They didn't understand the full scope, but my data was undeniable. I used the money not for fancy equipment, but for a specialized irrigation system that could deliver precise, mineral-adjusted water to 10 acres of the property. By the end of that second year, I wasn't harvesting grams. I was harvesting kilograms. I filed 2 patents, one for the cultivation method of Oreo fungus borealis and another for the extraction and refinement process. Then I sent a sample, along with my patent documents, to the head of R&D at Genevieve, the most exclusive cosmetics company in Switzerland. 3 weeks later, their executive team wasn't calling me. They were on a private jet to my small, local airport. I met them in my shack, which now doubled as a boardroom. They walked out onto the barren, their expensive Italian shoes crunching on the salt-white soil, and stared in disbelief at 10 acres of scrub brush shimmering with biological gold. They offered me a partnership on the spot. I turned it down. I didn't want a partner. I had the supply, and I knew what it was worth. We negotiated for 2 days. I never raised my voice. I never got emotional. I just showed them the data. By the time they left, I had a signed contract in my hand, an exclusive 10-year supply deal worth a guaranteed 9 figures. My little company, which I named Terra Aureum, Golden Earth, was valued at over $300 million. At the same time, the first cracks were appearing in Mark's empire. The economy had taken a downturn. Phase 2 of Creekwood Estates wasn't selling. Worse, he'd cut corners on the environmental surveys. The state's Department of Environmental Protection hit him with a massive fine for water runoff violations that were polluting the very river his development was named after. Construction ground to a halt. His loans were coming due, and his cash flow had dried up. The final act didn't happen in a lawyer's office or a family dinner. It happened on the glossy pages of Forbes magazine. A young, ambitious journalist had heard rumors of a massive biotech deal happening in the middle of nowhere. She tracked me down, expecting to find a Silicon Valley transplant. She found me, in my work boots and dusty jeans, standing in my field of weeds. I told her everything. The family history. The useless research. The science behind the soil. The years of quiet, obsessive work. The article came out 2 months later. The title was The Barren Gold Rush: How Botanist Elias Vance Turned a Family Curse into a $300 million Fortune. The cover photo was a masterpiece of unintentional revenge. I was in the foreground, holding a single, golden-flecked root. My face was calm, content. In the background, out of focus but unmistakable, was the view across the valley. The skeletal, half-built frames of Mark's failed Creekwood estates, overgrown with weeds, a monument to his greed. I heard the fallout was immediate. Mark's bankers, who had been considering extending his credit, saw the article. They didn't just refuse, they called in his entire loan portfolio immediately. The contrast was too stark. The brother he'd cheated was on the cover of Forbes for creating a new market out of thin air, while he was exposed as a failing developer who'd built his dream on a foundation of debt and arrogance. He lost everything. The land, the development, his reputation. The family, who had once praised his vision, now spoke his name in hushed, embarrassed tones. A week after the article was published, I got a text from him. The first communication in over a year. "You set me up," it read. I thought about it for a moment, standing on the porch of the new modern home I'd built to replace the shack, watching the sunset paint the salt flats in hues of orange and pink. "No, Mark," I typed back. "You saw a patch of dirt and took it. I saw a world and earned it." I never heard from him again. Last year, I used some of the profits to buy back the rest of the old Patterson farmland at the bankruptcy auction for pennies on the dollar. Not to develop it, but to restore it, using the same principles I'd applied to the Barren. I'm building a research institute dedicated to finding value in forgotten places. Sometimes, revenge isn't a loud, angry confrontation. Sometimes it's the quiet, steady process of growth. It's the silent harvest. Mark thought the value was in what was obvious, what could be quickly built and sold. He never understood that the greatest treasures aren't on the surface. They're buried deep, waiting for someone with the patience to look, the knowledge to understand, and the courage to cultivate them. He gave me a piece of worthless land. I turned it into a legacy.